Joining me now on the Knicks Film School pregame show with the New York Knicks taking on the Miami Heat, the 6 against the 7 currently in the Eastern Conference. The first matchup between, as far as I'm concerned, these longtime rivals, although the Miami Heat probably former rivals because it's a while since these two teams have mattered at the same time. Heat covers the Miami Heat. And if you go by their Twitter account, they cover the team. They want to emphasize they just cover the team for the Miami Heat Beats, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Giancarlo Navas, welcome to the Knicks Film School Podcast.
Andrew, I'm so excited to be on Maiden Voyage. Blue Wire family over here. We all stick out for each other. So listen, happy to talk. You know, we weren't featured on Rival Weeks. I was upset about that. You know, we're right outside of Rival. I'm like, this was it in the 90s, and these fan bases still hate each other, so I felt slighted.
I'm so glad you said it, because that was my very minor nitpick of Rivalry Week. We played the Cavaliers on Tuesday, and it's like, I get it, Donovan Mitchell went to the Cavs, but not the Knicks. I just have no animosity against the Cavaliers whatsoever. And then, like, as far as I'm concerned, and some of these youngins, some of these Gen Zers don't understand the wars that existed in the 1990s. I guess let's start there before we get into this game and this season. Do you personally, if you want to go back to like when you first started watching basketball, do you still have that juice for the Knicks whenever they come into town that goes back to obviously the Riley connections and those heated postseason battles in the late 90s?
Andrew, there are only two teams I wish nothing but the worst for.
Wow.
The Philadelphia 76ers and the New York Knicks.
I understand the Sixers thing. That's a whole different thing, but I could with this
day. I can't, man. Listen, and as a Heat guy, you know, and I think, you know, Andrew, you can probably speak to this too. There's like a socio dynamic to this where New Yorkers come into our city and tell us how great New York is, except they're not in New York anymore. So we got to hear it all the time. There's a bunch of Jets fans everywhere too.
Oh man.
And then everybody has a Yankee cap. And I'm like, where did you people come from? And it's always in the cold months. So like they run away. They say, man, New York, it's so great. And then, you know, they're here when it's cold and then they leave. And then, yeah. So there's a little bit of that going on too.
So I can't speak to the socio-economic politics of New Yorkers deciding that the city is the greatest place in the world and then deciding to leave and move to the place where the weather is perfect year round. I would get annoyed about that too. There's also, it's not a specific Miami to New York issue, but New York also has a lot of transplants.
Yeah.
So we can almost empathize with that issue that everybody comes here and thinks, oh, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. It's the greatest city in the world. It's like, you moved here when you were 22. So there's like a thing I can understand where it's like, oh, you retired down here. You moved down here because it's cheaper to live and it's the weather's nicer year round. So I get that. As far as sports,
it's like they're around. I think there's more New Yorkers here than any other, you know, other than like locals. So there's
especially
like
recently. Yes. Yeah. I have a lot of friends that moved down, maybe not even to Miami, but to Florida in the past couple of years.
Trash talk is in proximity. This was before Twitter. We didn't, you know, before you didn't have to, you couldn't trash talk other fan bases like that. They were here. We trash talked them at the grocery store. They were our coworkers. You know what I mean? So that kind of proximity with everything else that happened kind of birthed a pretty unique, I think one of the more unique rivalries that, and I still, I don't know how Knicks fans feel. I know Heat fans, most of them to this day, they don't even know why. They just go, F the Knicks.
Yes. I can also relate to that in the sense that the Heat are still the number one team I get up for.
Let's go.
As a result, I echo the same sentiment right back whenever that comes into my little bubble. Having said that, as far as the other teams' rivalry, I'm also a Jets fan. While the Jet Dolphin thing is a thing, and I'm sure you deal with it with a lot of Jet fans that have moved down to South Florida, we have the shared hatred of the Patriots, at least until, you know, the last couple of years. It was always like, yes, there's a rivalry, Jets Dolphins. The last 20 years, though, has been all about us finishing second to this evil empire in New England. So there was at least that thing we could both relate to. The Yankee thing, I'm a Mets fan. So the Mets and Marlins, while they've been in the division, I've never actually hated the Marlins. There's never been a time where...
Who cares about the Marlins?
Well, see, that's the other part,
That's
is
the
that
truth,
if I were to be like F the Marlins to a South Florida person, they'd be like, okay.
I think the Yankees have more of a reason because of that World Series. And
World Series, that's right.
Miguel Cabrera like making fun of Jeter at the dugout or whatever.
Mhm.
I'm not a big baseball guy, but I'm also a Jags fan.
Oh, so
the
Dolphins aren't. Gotcha. So the Dolphins are also a team you make fun
I'm gonna give you guys this. You New York, either Jets or Giants fans or anybody. The Dolphins don't have a single playoff win since Dwayne Wade was drafted.
Yep.
So the entirety of Dwayne Wade's NBA life and beyond, the Dolphins have not won a single playoff game. And I believe they've only made the postseason like 3 times since, which is the amount of Heat championships that they have in that time. Just a little fun fact for y'all Jets and Giants fans to throw at Dolphins fans.
Believe me, I've may or may not have already used the line in many a Dolphin debate that it's like, oh, let's go pull up the VHS of your last playoff win. So I completely get the trash talk. There's obviously the Derek Jeter angle that he like owned kind of the Marlins for a couple of years.
He left.
Well, he left now, but I know that for those Marlins fans that do exist, I can't tell if it's like a thanks, Derek, or because you're not David Sampson, or if it's a like you also were bad. And I don't know. There's a baseball conversation we could save for a different podcast. As far as basketball is concerned, I'm very happy to hear that the rivalry is not dead, because I thought I was banging my head against the wall every time the Heat came into town. And it's like, all right, got to win this one. This is a must win. When Emmanuel Quickley last year led that fourth quarter comeback during a lost Knicks season, it still led to one of my favorite like post-game celebrations, because like the Heat still matter to me, and it would be fun. Like, I don't know how this season will eventually play out. I think the Heat are starting to separate themselves a little bit, not from like a non-play-in team to where they'll catch up to Cleveland or whatnot. We'll talk about that season and this season in just a little bit. But as far as the chance of it being like a 7-8 play-in matchup between the Knicks and the Heat, that would be fun. I would hate every second of it because of the ramifications. But I guess I'll just ask, is that something you would sign up for today, given, not making the playoffs being like a possibility? If you're going to miss the playoffs and end up in the play-in, you got to want Knicks Heat.
Oh, yeah, no.
Matchup, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no, I need that. And I don't also like we're both in the content biz. You know how great that will be for us, bro?
Oh my gosh. Us linking up for that. Shoot, at a certain point, because that game I think would be in South Beach, the coverage that would go around it for a couple of days.
Be careful,
throughout the NBA TV would put up for the couple of days of like, oh wow, this is the suspension
game. No, that'd be ABC.
Oh yeah, it's the ABC. Yeah, I'm saying the fact that like what would they would put up to get ready for it, whether it be games from the late 90s just playing all throughout the weekend. I guess that week I should say.
The picture of Jeff Van Gundy clinging onto Alonzo Mourning's ankle all over the place. By the way, Andrew, I don't want Miami fans to get mad at you because we're Blue Wire fam. They don't play on South Beach. They play in downtown Miami.
That's right.
Miami fans get very defensive about that. I don't really know why, but they really hate it.
So, like I was telling you before we started recording, I was in South Beach this summer, or in Miami, I should say, but then to South Beach is where I stayed. It's like the very last point of downtown Miami. Like it's the arena and then water is right next to it. So we're talking about a span of like a couple hundred yards.
You can walk. Literally, there's a causeway where you can theoretically walk and be on the beach.
It'd be one thing if like people give Jets and Giants fan shit because they don't technically play in New York. They play in New Jersey. But it's literally the distance between whatever FTX Arena, whatever the Heat's arena's name is for now. That's a whole another podcast.
Miami-Dade Arena.
Miami-Dade Arena. Okay. It's the distance between Miami-Dade Arena and where the actual beach starts of South Beach. It's the distance between MetLife Stadium and like the Lincoln Tunnel. Crazy. So yeah. Well, let's talk about the Miami Heat and how this season has gone. 29-23 coming into today. Worst offensive rating in the NBA, one of the best defensive ratings in the NBA this season. So I've been tracking them because, again, rival. And, I've obviously noticed the 3-point shooting hasn't been the same as it was last year. You also notice Jimmy Butler when he doesn't play, how the absence is notable. I am curious to get your Kyle Lowry takes after seeing defender of Kyle Lowry being in your bio. But just general vibes of the Miami Heat this season. How have they been? How has the fan base been, enjoying or not enjoying this season?
Loaded question. Vibes are off. Are off. I think that the fan base, there was something that came out recently that by like capita, Heat Twitter is the most negative, which tracks, by the way. I mean, that's a constant battle I'm seeing on Twitter all the time. It's just people wanting to be mad, people mad that you're not negative enough on the team. We've been called toxically positive because we say they're probably a first or second round out. They can't contend in this condition. And people say that's too positive. It's bad.
Second on that list is the Knicks, so I understand the toxicity.
Look at this, man. Look at us.
Yeah, look at us.
Look at us. But the fan base is upset. The vibes are off, and I think that it's not just that they're not winning at the rate that they felt that they should. Because last year they were the 1 seed, right? And I think you understand that Jimmy's above 30. You kind of want to maximize the prime of his career. Bam's having the best season of his career. Tyler Hero's having the best season of his career. So the fan base is upset that it feels like that's getting wasted because at one point Jimmy's not going to be this because Jimmy's still incredible. And at some point with the style that he plays, that is going to fizzle out, and then you're stuck with him on a supermax deal. So people are upset. The 3-point shooting, they went from the best shooting team to one of the worst shooting teams in the league. I don't have much of an explanation for that other than they don't have a power forward and a bunch of guys are playing out of position. And I do think that wear and tear and these guys not being in the correct spots has affected that some. I think some of it is certain guys falling back to earth. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Kyle, although I think his is more playing through a hamstring injury in the postseason. But they have a lot of guys that have just regressed. So if you're not getting anything from your role guys, your star players don't really shoot other than Tyler, who's been a decent shooter. I think you want that to be a little better too, but whatever. That kind of creates a situation where, your offense was already like okay, even when you were good. So you take away the shooting, you're the 27th offense in the league. Your defense is really good. And part of that is because you forced almost the most turnovers in the league, which even that doesn't juice your offense enough. And you just kind of have a team that I think on any night they can compete with anybody because you have Jimmy and Bam. But throughout the course of 82, and I think throughout a full playoff run, they're just not going to have enough juice to really contend for 7 games against a good team. And I don't think they could put together like a 10-game win streak or an 8-game win streak. I don't think they've won more than 5 or 6 this year. And that tells me that they just can't put prolonged stretches of basketball that they're just beating a bunch of teams. And I think they're about 29 and 23 sounds about right,
Yeah. And it's funny going into some research about the Heat. Now I obviously noticed it throughout the season and how like their schedule got a little easier, which is why I think you've seen the record become what it is. Yet the parallels to the Knicks in that, like, I would put Bam and Jimmy ahead of Brunson and Randall just for resume and pedigree, but like you have 2 main guys, like the Knicks have 2 main guys that they feature in their offense, and defense is another story, which is why I think that edge would obviously go to the Miami Heat. You have a draft pick from the 2019 draft with Tyler Hero and RJ Barrett, who will inevitably be linked because of that's just what we do with draft picks. The big difference, and I think this is now when we can get into the Kyle Lowry conversation, is the Knicks don't have that veteran guy. You could say it's Derrick Rose, but Derrick Rose is out of the rotation, and the Knicks have been able to kind of weather that storm when Rose went out of the rotation. Kyle Lowry, on the other hand, now I want to hear your take on this. What is your reaction or I guess analysis of how the first year and a half of Kyle Lowry on this contract in Miami have gone? And then, like, what has the pushback been to you and I guess to Lowry and then from the fan base?
So I think that question should be broken down into 2, because last season he was incredible. Career high, shooting at the rim, shooting 38% from the field, really just, was one of the league leaders in assist percentage, wasn't turning the ball over a lot, kept them afloat when Jimmy and Bam missed a ton of time. Bam had a really bad hand injury last year. He got dunking in a game against Denver, and he was out for I think 2 months or 2 months and change. Jimmy missed a ton of time because he's Jimmy and he misses time. And it was also a COVID season. And they had a time where a bunch of guys missed COVID. They signed Mario Chalmers to a contract. If you guys don't remember, like it got to that point. Kyle Guy was playing legitimate 30 minutes for them a night.
There is not to interrupt you, but there is a dip in. There's weird roster additions for literally every team from about mid-December to like mid-January, because every team, the Knicks went out and got Damian Dotson. There were these lineups where they had 3 centers, like Julius Randle was playing the 2 because half the team had COVID. Kemba Walker got taken out of the rotation, and Tibbs was like, I'm doing everything but playing Kemba Walker. Then when it came down to it, it was like, all right, we've got 6 healthy bodies tonight, and then 3 guys that we've allowed to sign because of exceptions. Fine, Kemba, we'll put you in. Kemba wins player of the week from that stretch, because you need to give him like 22 days off in order for him to be good.
Yeah.
And so I completely empathize with like, oh, Mario Chalmers. That was weird.
He didn't play though. He didn't play.
But you see him suddenly on an NBA roster for a couple of weeks. I completely understand it.
They were in, I believe it was San Antonio or Houston, and they literally had to call players who were drivable distances away from them. And I was like, we've lost the plot here.
Yeah.
But that was their season, just like everybody else. And Kyle Lowry played a lot of games. He missed time because he did not miss time for injury. He missed about 19 games because he had a personal family issue that he had to attend to for a long time. And that was an on and off thing. So he did not miss games for injury. But throughout that stretch, they went on the road at Phoenix and they beat the brakes off of the Suns, who were like the best team in the regular season team that year. They had a lot of really good road wins with just Kyle and all these, G League or pickup guys. And I mean, that was incredible. And he gets hurt against the Hawks, plays through a hamstring injury, doesn't look great. Had that big game 6 against Boston, which, he and Jimmy really kind of won that game for them. And that's really all any notable thing he did in the playoffs was get hurt and have that game 6, because he just wasn't right after a really, really good regular season. So fans were mad that, they're like a 37-year-old got hurt in the playoffs. Who would have thought, right? So that's fans were mad at. And I don't think that was totally fair. I understand kind of they didn't want to sign an old guy, but, he was so good. And that was a freak kind of hamstring injury. This year, shooting at the rim, I said 55%. That's just not. His finishing has gone from 69 to 55.
Yeah.
The shooting went from 38 to 34. And you might say 34, that's like, okay. It's been so up and down. And if he shoots 40%, it's like a 2 of 5. It's not like a more impactful, where he's like really a shooting threat, because teams have decided that they're going to guard off of him. He'll be the screener in actions, and teams are like, yeah, I don't care, you can pop. We're just going to make sure that we kind of sink our guy and make sure that we tag Bam or Jimmy or whoever the roller is. So I understand the fan base being like, this guy's scoring single digits too often. They need a guy who can put the ball in the basket, because, they just don't have anybody outside of those, Jimmy and Bam and Tyler, who's kind of been lost at sea for a month. So I think the fan base is justifiably like, this guy is making $30 million a year and he is not scoring enough points. And he continually puts up stat lines where it's like 8 points, 2 assists, 3 rebounds, a steal. And they're like, that's not good enough. And I frankly agree with that and understand. I think that there are some nuances lost, and kind of they do play better with him on the floor. They are kind of better with him on the floor than off the floor. I do think the idea of like running Gabe as your starting point guard, him making like 50 decisions in pick and roll, is a bad idea. I think Kyle's still like a low turnover point guard. He still play makes. And the last thing that I'll say in his defense is Tyler Hero has emerged as the legitimate pick and roll creator. And I think deservedly so, he has gotten those reps over Kyle, because you need to build synergy between he and Bam. They're both signed to long, big extensions, and they're both your 2 young cornerstones. And I think Tyler has just been better than Kyle in pick and roll this year. And I think that Kyle got relegated to an off-ball guard role, which I think you could say, well, he did that with Van Vliet. It's not the same, because Jimmy's also a non-shooter, and he's not shooting the ball well this season. So it's taken him some soul searching. I think he'll figure it out. But I think the fan base ire is, I guess, justified. I think that they have taken it to a place, Andrew, where he is the most hated Heat player in my lifetime.
Whoa, in your lifetime. I'm trying to go through the
Hassan would have been it. Hassan
I was going to say Hassan Whiteside.
No, we're past that. I think we're past that. Yeah, we're past that.
Is that an expectations thing that this team was? I mean, you could say a Jimmy Butler shot away from making it to the finals, but they were the 1 seed, had home court, and were a game 7 away from the finals. And then to, I don't really have a question about the summer of Kevin Durant because I don't know how serious anybody's
they were serious.
I know they were serious. Okay.
Yeah, and we did some reporting on that. Like they were serious, and the reason, a part of the reason why they didn't do anything this offseason was, that was really the holdup. So they didn't go after guys that they probably could have gotten because they had a chance at Durant, and that was real, and that didn't happen. And sometimes you try to get Kevin Durant because he's the best player in the NBA and it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's because he's Kevin Durant. Exactly.
What can you do,
Yeah. Well, so that's why I go to expectations. And like the decision is a much different experience for me than it was for you, I'm going to assume. But when you've gotten the guy over and over and over again, you could argue 2 years ago, you got the guy in Kyle Lowry. He was one of the prizes of the offseason to then this season turn into what it is, where you didn't get Durant. I'm sure you just said it, in all honesty, the ceiling of this team probably isn't a championship. Is that all of that angst and all of that disappointment then being put onto Kyle Lowry when he's, like you said, an older player regressing in the later parts of his career?
I think for sure he's just not playing well enough with the contract. That's first and foremost. Guy with big contract not playing well is always going to get fans mad, even though they could amnesty him right now and still not have cap space. So his numbers not really preventing them from doing anything. But, regardless, big guy who, got hurt in the playoffs, that bothered them. And guy who's not performing this year on big contracts bothering them. And the expectation of winning is just, this organization has always kind of preached winning over everything. And that has kind of leaked into the fan base that this is not good enough. And I understand. I think they had a vision for Kyle. They want more of a scorer, which he's not. And I think that's kind of always been the push-pull with him in the fan base. And also, Andrew, he's a very persnickety guy. If you cover him, he's not like a real happy, love the media kind of guy. He's like, he has a little edge to him. He's not there to be your friend, and he doesn't play the organization's game. And I think Heat fans want everybody to fall in line to Heat culture, down to LeBron. Because I remember when LeBron was here, LeBron would skip post games in Cleveland, and Dwayne Wade had to tell him, no, we don't do that here. You know what I mean? That's what Heat fans want. And Kyle came into camp. Kyle has a Kyle Lowry kind of body type, and that's not. James Johnson was told to go home when he reported to camp above body weight, body fat percentage. That's what they still do. Riley still does that here. So when Riley says, I think Kyle should lean out, and Kyle's like, I don't really care what Riley thinks. Fans don't like that. Fans are like, you should be a professional and do what your bosses tell you. And I think that kind of disconnect is what started it. Now I'm like, I don't like the policing of men's, body fat percentage, especially from old white guys, telling, young black men to do that. I think optically, I don't like that the organization does that. But Heat fans, best conditioned, the toughest, meanest, blah, 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 blah. So I think all of that together kind of plays into F this guy. Can we trade him for D'Angelo Russell? And that's where we are.
D'Angelo Russell.
That's what they want because they've got reported.
That is fascinating. And look, I've poked my fun at Heat culture in the past.
As you should.
From a hating ass New Yorker who my Jim Dolan is my owner. So I am at the mercy of
together.
Right. So I'm at the mercy of whatever culture my team is, part of. I will say the last couple of years, it's strictly been to basketball, where it's like we're all focused on the on-court product rather than, off the court stuff. But, you poke fun at Heat culture all you want. You have to respect it for what it is. It may be a little bit religious and cultish at a certain point, but I can't not call them a well-run, competent organization with incredible weather. to be like part of, but like to be part of the free agency draw. Like if the Knicks had
and no state tax, that
no
matters.
state tax, exactly. So you add in, like, if the Knicks had the Heat culture, if it was Knicks culture, but it was the exact same things being run, then the tiebreaker might be, well, no state income tax and, 80 degrees in January, So I can understand why the Heat have become to be a well-run organization with all the amenities is great. I'm curious to see, and this is like where my next question is going, with some of these role players that have, kind of come out of nowhere, the Max Struses, the Deadmans of the world, the like Hassan Whiteside, say what you want about his tenure in Miami. He is an example of that organization finding a diamond in the rough. Is any of that wearing thin toward these days with the way that this season has gone and, like where the next championship run might come from? Or does the fan base still trust that no matter what, Heat culture will eventually create the next contender?
Oh, fan base is turning on the organization.
They are turning on them. Wow.
That's a huge divide between people. And I think that's like one of the biggest ones. It's like the memes, Pat Riley's asleep at the wheel kind of jokes. And I think that fans, I don't want to be pro organization because I don't like being pro organization, but I do think they deserve, they got, I say that about to be pro organization. They got Jimmy Butler with no salary,
no cap space. Yeah. That's the reason to be pro organization. Yeah.
They flipped Josh Richardson, Hassan, and a first round pick for a sign and trade with Jimmy Butler. And the only reason they had to give the first round pick was they were up against a hard cap by their mistake for that summer of 2017, where they re-signed JJ, James Johnson, Hassan Whiteside, Dion Waiters, and Kelly Olynyk to 4-year deals. So if they had only done 3-year deals, they wouldn't have had to give up the first or Jay Rich. They could have just flipped Hassan for get him out of Jimmy's life. But in reality, they flipped Hassan, Jay Rich, and a first for Jimmy Butler. Right? They were literally like a few $1,000s under the hard cap, which was that's Andy Ellisberg. That's not even Pat. Pat probably did the deal, but that's Andy's kind of wizardry with the cap. But the fans are sick. Max Strus wore a shirt the other day that it just said undrafted with all the faces of all the undrafted players. Oh, wow. And Chef Trilly, shout out to Trilly, one of the more famous Heat tweeters, kind of said, are they trolling us? Because like fans are sick of the undrafted thing. They're like, can we just get some guys with talent? Can we not? And I understand. I get that because they have kind of circumvented their cap mistakes by getting these guys for cheap and kind of making them rotation players for minimum contracts, right? Like Max and Duncan, were minimum players before Duncan got paid. Gabe, obviously minimum player. These are all, Oladipo last year was a minimum player. All these guys, Deadman, last year minimum player. They're all like on nothing contracts because they're just paying all these other guys a ton of money, and they've kind of circumvented their own mistakes by finding these guys. And I think the most critical you can be of them is they overestimate these guys long-term and they overvalue them as cap assets. As you saw with giving Duncan the $16 million, I guess it was 16. Now it's at $19 million annually. I know that they knew that they didn't want to give that money. They knew that he was not going to live up to that contract, but they viewed it as a cap asset. And I think they've kind of been wrong because nobody wants him. And partly because his shooting has just gone so bad. But I do think that there's a lot of people that are like, I just want some like real talent. Can we just can we just draft somebody or something or things like that? Because that is wearing thin on the fan base.
I can relate to paying money to a shooter and then him not living up to said contract. But in the moment, looking at it as a cap asset with Evan Fournier, who was taken out of the Knicks rotation over the past couple months. So I can understand it to an extent. In the moment, were you in favor of the Duncan Robinson extension?
I was.
It was okay. So you're in favor of it.
So his drop off has been unreal. He went from legitimately the best shooter in the league. He was shooting 45% on like 12 attempts per game, and his points per possession off handoffs was like over 2. It was crazy.
Yeah.
He went from that to a season where he shot 41% on similar volume. And you're like, that's great, not historic. And then from there, he went to 37%. That was the first deal of the contract. And you're like, that's not That's good, not great. And now he's at 33%. I don't know if there's a precedent for that. I don't. And you could argue they should have traded Duncan the last year of his deal because they knew that it was going to cost money. It was going to be in the Bertans kind of family of contracts. And, you could see that. You could see that coming. You're like, a little bit of a down year for him. 41% is still really good, but it's not what he was last year. Do we really want to pay him? And we could move him for maybe a first. I mean, Robert Covington went for 2 firsts. You certainly could have gotten something for him. And instead of having to, but they decided to keep him and be competitive. That was that 2021 season. That was awful. That was the first post-bubble season. They had just come off the finals. I understand them not wanting to trade somebody. They probably told themselves, we got through COVID. All our guys are hurt, shortened season, blah, blah, blah. I don't think we should punt on this team. They suck. They lost to the Bucks. And we all know that what's his face outscored Jimmy Butler in the first round. So then they sign him and now they can't get rid of him. So I was in favor just because you can't let him go for nothing. And I do understand them believing in that team because they had just come off the finals and Jimmy's incredible. But clearly a mistake. I guess now not moving him, we can all do that in hindsight, but that kind of is what it is.
It's to a much different extent because Evan Fournier wasn't a Knick ahead of time. It wasn't re-signing a guy that had done something for your team. I can understand being like, wow, so this
didn't they trade for him mid-season? Was that
that was a signing? That was so.
Oh no, Boston traded for him.
Boston traded for him mid-season, and then when Fournier walked to go to the Knicks, it created this trade exception that they eventually used part of it for Derek White last year. But point being is that the Celtics were they might have actually used it on Gallinari this season, but regardless, Evan Fournier went to the Knicks.
That Gallinari was a Celtic.
I mean, Celtics fans, he's an important part of their deadline moves because he could technically be salary in some kind of deal because it's a 1-year deal. But neither here nor there. As far as to the point that the Heat culture projects, the Struces, the Gabe Vincents, the Deadmans of the world. And then you add, I mean, look, you could say Duncan Robinson is partially a Heat culture project that
totally, Orlando Robinson, like their backup center right now.
Who I should mention will be out for this game against the Knicks on Thursday.
Boy, I hope they don't have to play Deadman. Are you aware of how bad Deadman is?
Oh, not. Please enlighten me.
Deadman might be the worst player in the NBA. It's
on
crazy.
The NBA. Okay.
He's like minus 11 per 100 possessions when he plays.
Jeez.
And and Bam was like, there was a point where Bam was like +5 on the floor, and him and Deadman never play together. So it's like +5 when Bam's on, minus 11 when Deadman. That's a 16-point swing.
That type of swing is why Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier and some of these other guys are out of the rotation for the Knicks as well. This is going to lead to a question about Oladipo because different roles, different ages, obviously. But the Knicks have Emmanuel Quickley, who is like their de facto 6th starter, who is honestly playing his way into deserved starters minutes, if you want to look at it that way. And I just more so from a few NBA League Pass check-ins and then from some box score scouting, I see Oladipo is kind of like in the game in crunch time and playing important, minutes for this team. We are positive on Oladipo. Like what has the Oladipo experience been this season?
I am. So Heat fans like him. I'm kind of Okay. So, I mean, his finishing, like Kyle's, is bad. It's at 55, same number. His shooting is worse. It's at 30. He does give them some downhill zip. And at least when he's out there, you don't feel like he's not doing anything like some fans think of Kyle. I think he deserves their crunch time minutes. I think his defense is good. And part of why he's so important is because their defense right now is predicated on turning guys over. And, they don't foul a lot anymore. That's always been kind of like a hallmark of Riley and Spo teams. They just can I curse? I don't even know.
Yes, you can.
Okay, yeah, they fucking foul a lot. Okay. They hit you. They're physical. They hit you. They want to be felt. That's not this team this year. And I think part of that is because they literally don't have a power forward. And they've kind of retooled their defense a bit on the fly. And now they're just like, they ball pressure a ton. They trap some. They switch a lot, as they always have. They play those passing lanes really aggressively. And Oladipo's a huge part of that because of how athletic he is. And he's still probably one of their quicker guys, which is a little insane how unathletic they are. So he's deserved. I'm just not been a fan of what he's done on offense. I think he's been a sneaky good playmaker for them this year. His assist percentage is at like 21. He's just really been good with Bam at kind of that playmaking synergy. He hits big shots. The shooting numbers are just bad all around, but I mean, what he does on defense, and that's why I think he kind of gets the nod over Kyle in crunch time. For as good as Kyle is defensively, I just think Oladipo gives them a little bit more juice in terms of kind of that X factorness, right? You know, they both can switch a lot, but I just think he's a lot quicker and more athletic, and he forces a few more turnovers. And I think that's ultimately kind of the difference. And he plays really, and he's a bit more of a scorer.
Yeah, looking at his splits now, I didn't realize they're both shooting 40% ish on the season. And then, like you said, if you're gonna basically get the same output from both of them, you might as well go with the better defensive one.
Well, it's not even that. It's more of like Oladipo just does more on offense than Kyle at this point, because like Kyle's not on ball anymore. It's Jimmy and Tyler. So it's like, what are you doing off ball for me? And I think you kind of look at what Oladipo does and you're like, yeah, I just prefer you attacking a closeout more than Kyle.
What's a couple of questions before I let you get out of here, the move that maybe you or I'm trying to wonder if there's a difference between what you might want this team to do for the deadline and what Heat fans want this team to do. What is the expectation for the next 7 days?
So they, as I've already said a couple of times, they need a power forward.
Right.
That is, I mean, Caleb Martin is their starting four. That's not going to cut it, right? He's a 6'6" guard who's playing four. So that has to be the first order of business. They preferably that four needs to be a wing. I think you want him to be able to play some small ball five like PJ did last season. I don't think Orlando Robinson's a viable backup five in the playoffs. I think he's been good. They're like +4 or something when he plays and Bam sits, which is like all you really want. You just don't want to die when Bam sits. But he's a young center who plays drop. And I think that's just typical. Like that guy can't survive against a good offense in the playoffs. Against like Philadelphia, I'd be like kind of worried if like Harden kind of, if Bam and Embiid's minutes match up, and then like, okay, Orlando has to come in when Harden's in the game. That's kind of like, I could see that going bad, or Maxey kind of picking on him in a drop. They might have to blitz or play some zone, which I don't think you just want to like, I don't think you want the other team's offense dictating what your defense does like that. But I think that's kind of the first order of business. I do think that like, for all I defend Kyle for, he's my favorite player. I think he's still good, and I think he will figure out a lot of this stuff. I do think that looking to move him is viable. I think if you can get 2 wings for him, now maybe that's a lot. I don't know. I still think, the Clippers are interested. Can you get Robert Covington and like Marcus Morris, right? Is that something in the realm of, Robert Covington's not playing for them right now. And, if they were reportedly interested in Kyle and Kawhi wants him, is that something that you can do? And you get 2 guys that fill your biggest need, right? 2 wings and both can play defense, and one of them 1.5 shooters, depending on what you get out of Covington. So like, I'm open to that, and I mentioned how Oladipo's been an improved playmaker. Tyler's kind of taken some pick and roll reps. So I could get talked into that. I wouldn't be happy, but I'd be like, that probably makes them better. Kyle's money comes off when Jimmy's extension kicks in. I think that's really important to know as well. So it expires next season. Not that expiring contracts really have like a ton of value anymore. Bobby Marks was talking about that in the low post, and I was like, that is so true. That doesn't weigh the same like we used to, but I think those are the kinds of moves. I've heard that the splash might not be what you expect. They're also looking for like a dirty work kind of guy, which kind of makes me groan. I was like, it's so Heat. But kind of also what they need in that 4 spot. If they can't find a shooter, which I think is a priority, they're going to look for like that. Bogdanovich is another guy that I like, but I do think they're just going to be outbid for him pretty badly. I'll
tell you right now, if they turn Kyle Lowry into Marcus Morris, former Knick Marcus Morris and Rocco, and basically turn him, because like you said, Kawhi might want his old friend from Toronto over in LA. That's an outstanding job by like, you could say Riley, you can go with Ellisberg, you can go with the front office on this, but that I might have to concede that he cultures more than I've ever given it credit for.
That's interesting that you think that's a home run. You think that's a home run for them?
I wonder what you keep, like you said, I think Lowry at this point in his career, I don't know. You don't think it raises their ceiling a little bit?
I don't think it makes them
as wings, though. You can then match up a little better with some of the other teams.
I don't think it makes them title contenders. Like, I don't think there's a move really that's available. Now, let's say they can find a way to free up a pick and make a real offer for Anunoby, right? Because the problem is they have so it's funny. We'll kind of tie everything back together. The pick that they sent. So the way that they got Butler was, they were up against a hard cap. Mm-hmm. So what they had to do was they had to shave off like $15 million to get there. And the way that they did that was they traded Hassan for Myers Leonard and Mo Harkless to the Blazers. Then they waived and stretched Ryan Anderson, which saved them $5 million. And they had traded Tyler Johnson for Ryan Anderson in like a bad contract swap. So they waive and stretch Anderson, so they freed up $5 million to get Jimmy under the hard cap. And then they sent Mo Harkless with the first round pick to the Clippers to dump that $10 million. So that's your $15 million. You sign and trade Jimmy, and boom, he's here. Sign and trade triggers a hard cap. You're a couple K under it. Hunky dory. They make the finals. Everyone's happy. That pick with and this pisses me off because the Clippers started Mo Harkless that year. So it's like you gave them a first round pick and a starter for nothing. That drives me crazy. Regardless,
I get it. Believe me, I get it.
That first round pick with the Clippers was sent to Oklahoma City in the Paul George deal. That pick had protections. I think it was like top 15 protected. And that pick has not conveyed because the protections keep rolling it back. So when a pick's protected, you can't trade it the following year because you don't know if it's going to convey or not. So now the Heat have tried to make deals with the Thunder to remove protections, but they don't have anything to give them to remove the protections.
Right.
They gave them KZ to remove protections on a different pick, but that last pick, the Mo Harkless pick, they can't. So if they can find a way to get the Thunder to remove those protections, that frees up one additional pick that they can trade, so they can get up to 3, which then they can make the Anunoby offer. Now, whether you think that's too much or not, I think that's the kind of player that changes your season. And I think anything other than that, you're just getting a little bit better so that you can lose in the second round. And I just don't know if that's worth it when you have long-term kind of goals.
It's the 2025 first, so it's top 14 protected?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I went to Real GM to double check the protections on it, which, look, the Knicks have this I call it a poo-poo platter because the Knicks made this draft day deal. It was mostly the beginning of clearing up cap space for Jalen Brunson, which has been a win. But they basically traded the 11th pick to then get 3 first-round picks back. And these picks, like they have a Bucks pick, which is going to convey in 2025. The Detroit pick, which isn't going to convey until they get good. And Washington's fascinating because it might convey this year the way that they've played lately, which would give the next 3 first-round picks. But I can understand from the OKC side holding another team hostage in the sense that we control this per protections, and you'd have to give us something back in order to convey that pick or use it in an asset type of deal. I guess I'm not. From what it sounds like, I'm nowhere near as toxic as the Heat fan base is about Lowry.
No.
But I do think I lean more toward that direction. I do hear you that it's really more just this season has gone that direction. But I thought that was the gamble you made, that last year was kind of the all-in year that
I'm glad you say that, Andrew, because that's why I'm not too mad about this year. I'm like, man, they went all in last year, and that was really the window to win, and they were clearly title good. And Kyle's hamstring exploded. Max was hurt in the conference finals. Jimmy missed a damn game. Tyler did not play the last 2, and PJ was hurt. How you had all that, and you were still a very suspect out of bounds 3 from Strus and and all that. Jimmy was going down, pulled up, and had it to win. That was a title good team. Whether they would have been washed by the Warriors or not is whatever. But if they have a healthy postseason, I think they get to the finals. And that's a series because they have always played the Warriors well. And I think and I've talked about this on my show a ton. There's only a few guys in the league, Andrew, that like legitimately can really hunt a bad defender and make them pay. It's like LeBron, because Tatum doesn't do it enough.
No.
Right? He doesn't have Kawhi when he's healthy. Absolutely. Luka, absolutely. LeBron James, absolutely. Giannis doesn't even do it to that degree. Jimmy's with those guys. You watch any playoff series, Jimmy's like, where's George Hill? Where's Kemba Walker? When they played the Celtics in the bubble. Where's Derek White, who's a good defender, but not strong enough. He's that kind of guy. So against like the Warriors, bring me Steph Curry. And that's what happens in the regular season. He just picks on Jordan Poole or Curry or whatever, and he'll will you to 100 something points because he's just going to pick on your bad matchup, and no amount of help you send, can stop the grift. So
yeah, the way I looked at the Kyle Lowry signing was because it made the most sense for Miami, in that their window with Butler getting up there in age was, especially with the East kind of being what it was, like Brooklyn being in disarray and the Celtics team being unproven, it made sense.
And Milwaukee getting worse.
Well, Milwaukee getting worse, and Milwaukee kind of going all in on this team. The Middleton injury, I don't want to blame him completely for, but there were some injury questions even during the year that they won the title. Like, people forget Giannis missed the last 2 games or 3 games of that Atlanta series. And if it wasn't for the fact that Trace stepped on a referee's ankle, we might have a much different conversation about Giannis at this point in his career. Look, I can't say I wish you luck on Thursday night. This kind of leads into the conversation about the game.
Yeah.
But you get it. The Knicks, as far as the Heat this season are concerned, I think I predicted before the season a regression, more just because I thought the East would have gotten better. And some of these assets that they've gone all in for were meant to be for last year and not for this season. As far as this game is concerned on Thursday night, do you have a question about the Knicks? Do you have any thoughts about the Knicks and how their season's gone from afar?
Actually, I'm more pertaining to the game and something that I'm curious as to what you think about.
Mm-hmm.
So Miami and New York have a very similar kind of defensive shot profile. Miami second in the league at limiting attempts at the rim. New York, I think 5th or something. And same with threes. Miami allows a ton of threes. They allow the 2nd most threes in the league, and New York allows the 4th most threes in the league. So kind of funny how both Tibbs and Spo, and that hasn't always kind of been a Tibbs thing, and how it's kind of become that. And I was looking at some numbers. So like Randall and Brunson together, they're like minus 1.4 net rating in almost 1,500 minutes, which is, I think, pretty significant. And I kind of wanted to ask you, so is that, they're obviously like a defense team. Is that what's going on there? Because those two have a defensive rating of 120, which that doesn't seem survivable. And I'm just kind of wondering, is it the same deal where last season their bench really bailed out the starters?
Oh, no, the opposite this year.
The starters have kind of stepped up.
So there's an element to the Randall Brunson minutes that is why it's not that I disagree with the negative 1.4, like the numbers are what they are, especially in 1,500 minutes. Rarely are those minutes played without RJ Barrett. Rarely are those minutes, like there's this stretch for the first 20 or so games where they were still figuring out what this team was, where Evan Fournier was playing a ton of minutes with them. What's it called? Isaiah Hartenstein, because Mitchell Robinson got hurt earlier in the season, was playing a ton of minutes with them. And look, Jalen Brunson, for the revelation that he's been offensively, and the Knicks finally having a point guard, it's been different this year in that he is great offensively, and then he's now asked to play starters minutes as the starting point guard. So you talked about Jimmy Butler hunting the team's worst defender. Be prepared for a lot of switches from between Jimmy Butler onto Jalen Brunson. I will say the Knicks play a lot of drop coverage, so I wonder how much they'll actually switch it tomorrow night. But
that'll be a late game thing.
Right.
They don't go to that so much in the flow, and they like to kind of see what they get out of a drop.
Well, this also adds to the RJ Barrett conversation. So look, I've kind of tapped out of Twitter as far as that's concerned, because it's just gotten, everybody's loud, everybody's mad. We're recording this the night after RJ Barrett, I don't want to say was benched. He just was for the See, I'm trying to be nice because I know people who love RJ Barrett are going to watch this. I thought he played a below average game against the Lakers.
You sound like me and Kyle. You sound
right,
like me and Kyle.
I because I don't hate RJ Barrett. I think as a Knicks
fans, I think lost the plot with him. I don't understand where they have gotten this delusion of what RJ Barrett is. I go, you think he's what now?
Yes.
One of my best friends.
That's the thing we deal with. Yes.
And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, one of the best young players in the league. I go, you sound like you know what you know what you guys sound like? You sound like Laker fans with Shannon Brown.
Easy on the you guys, first of all, because I'm not
just like, what do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people on that? I do think I think he's a third guy. I think he's a third or fourth guy on a good team. And I think the Knicks are a good enough team, or he's been the third guy. We're coming off of a game where he played horrific in the first half, I thought, kind of found a way to get some baskets in the third and fourth quarter. And he got benched for the final 7 minutes of the game and 7 minutes of regulation and all of overtime. And it's not anti-RJ, it's pro-Immanuel Quickley. Immanuel Quickley is playing his way. He played himself out of trade negotiations or trade considerations.
He beat the allegations.
He did. To a certain point. We did some reporting. At least we had somebody from the beat come on and do some reporting with us that they were shopping Immanuel Quickley, and he's just becoming untouchable at this point. To have this type of guy on a rookie contract and probably soon to be be given an extension has been something that you have to have him on the court, which is why I think if you go to 3-man lineups, which is the long way of getting to this, if you go to Quickley next to both of them, if you want to just do 2-man, what Brunson and Quickley are together, what Randall and Quickley are together, and then the both of them next to Quickley in the 3-man lineup, and then compare all of them and just sub it in with RJ. So it's clearly not a fit, which is where the fan base who loves RJ Barrett and thinks he's the next Jimmy Butler might be frustrated that they're kind of deferring from RJ or that Quickley is starting to come on, or they're frustrated that they've committed to Julius Randle the way that they have rather than the guy that they took third overall.
So with what you said, by the way, I also checked the Brunson and Randall's numbers on the floor without Fournier and without Barrett, and they're +6 for 100 possessions.
So there you go.
Yeah, 500 minutes or something. So Brunson plus Randall, no Barrett and no Quickley. I'm sorry. No, it's with Brunson, Quickley, Randall, and Quickley, no Barrett. 319 minutes plus almost 11 per 100 possessions. Defense stabilizes to 108 defensive rating, a 119 offensive rating. That's really good.
So I'll even
without Quickley -5. Without Quickley -5.
That specific sentence you just said. Every single thing you find in the statistics about the Knicks this season without Immanuel Quickley is bad. With Immanuel Quickley is one of the best defenses in the league. Now, granted, he's playing some backup minutes.
Jesus, you're right.
So he's the backup. What's it called? He's the backup point guard / wings, because Deuce McBride is kind of the backup point guard, but he plays 7 to 10 minutes a game. Immanuel Quickley, though, comes in with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. I'm telling you, you will see Immanuel Quickley go to the scorer's table. This is the template coaching that Tibbs can do sometimes. And then he will play the rest of the first, most of the second, get taken out with about 3 or 4 minutes left. And then it's a basic, you have to see how the game is going. He'll come in the same thing, third quarter, 5 minutes left, and then either play the rest of the game or come out with about a couple minutes left and RJ will come back in. And that's, I think, where the fan base is getting frustrated with the handling of RJ. If you're pro RJ, or those 3 minutes at the end of the game shouldn't even happen. They quickly should be closing these games as well. There's a fit issue, I think, is more what it's come to because of how good Immanuel Quickley's been this year.
I got 2 questions for you. So
what's up?
Quickley on +6, Quickley off -4, right? Obviously, 10-point swing, enormous. Yeah. Kind of everything you say.
Matches the eye test too.
Yeah. So you look at I love EPM. It's one of my favorite advanced metrics organizations. It was voted I think the second best metric by GMs and stuff. Quickley plus 0.9 EPM. Fine. You're not hurting, estimated wins above replacement for EPM, 3.7, pretty good, right? And it's just the lineup data. And I'm always interested in this when the lineup data is saying something that the advanced metrics aren't getting. And I think we have that here with Quickley. And is that just because his DPM is good. It's plus 0.9. I mean, again, it's fine, but what you're telling me, he's just making a difference on defense and kind of giving them quickness, no pun intended, and kind of zip.
Yeah. He's able to guard like almost every wing position. Against forwards is where you might see him taken advantage of, but he's great in passing lanes. He's great on ball. He's great. Anticipatory. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm just going to create it now. Like he anticipates a lot of passes. So he's always able to, he's never late on a rotation is basically what I'm trying to say. He's been outstanding. And look, is
that the 3-point defense? Like, cause when he's on, opponents are shooting 32% from three. When he's off, it goes up to 39. And that's in a lot of minutes, right? That's 1,400 minutes and 1,100 with him off. That's a ton of minutes that I'm like, is that real?
Well, so remember what I told you, it's not just quickly on, it's RJ off. And the other part about the RJ Barrett conversation that has been frustrating. I know you're looking up the numbers now,
yeah,
but the defense has, I don't want to say gone off a cliff completely because he's not unplayable, but he's not to the point where it's like, all right, even if you're not getting what you need from him on offense, at least you've got like a solid, not net positive, not like net neutral defender. And it's been a net negative from the entire season that he's played so far.
So filtering Barrett out of quickly stuff doesn't really move anything one way or the other. It just seems like so my friends and I come from a long tradition of playing fighting games, right? Street Fighter, Melee, right? All that stuff. And when we used to play with our friends, we used to call it the deciding factor. We'd play teams. If you're the deciding factor for winning or losing, so we kind of switch teams all the time. It would appear that quickly is the deciding factor for winning here because he erases the stench that is RJ Barrett.
Look, I don't want to call him. You said it, not me. Knicks fans attacked him.
I'm a Heat fan. I'm allowed to.
Yes, the Heat fan called him that RJ Barrett truthers. Okay, why does he hate RJ Barrett? I just look as somebody who like I know the stats. I appreciate the impact metrics. Is like this is my first year really getting into them. I'm diving into them a little bit more. The eye test alone, there is a considerable difference. It's why I told you about the rotations and why the first 7 minutes of the game tomorrow night, I expect the Miami Heat to look better than the Knicks. And then Emmanuel quickly will come into the game and there will be an impact that you will see. Like
are you guys a good third quarter team?
Not the first 7 minutes.
Because we're like the worst. We call it the turd quarter.
That's amazing.
That's a Heat Twitter staple since the LeBron years.
So that's the third quarter of doom is what we call it because the way the Knicks were playing, again, you were onto something about how the bench has come in and bailed them out the last two seasons. This season, some of it is a physical decline in Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier. So that way, like Quentin Grimes got promoted to the bench. Emmanuel quickly became like the only dependable bench piece. I don't want to have an Obi Toppin conversation. I don't think he's being handled correctly. I also don't think he's in the role that they've asked him to do been good enough. He's only playing. And plus he also had this injury that took him out of any kind of rotation where he was getting more and more minutes. Having said that, the third quarter of doom was something that would happen in that the bench would cut, like the starters would get off to a rocky start or a neutral start. They'd come in, help build, the bench would come in, build a lead in the late first, early second. The starters would let them back in the game at the end of the second. The third quarter of doom would show up. They'd lose it. And then the bench would have to come in and bail them out in the late third, early fourth. And then, we'll see what happens in crunch time. That's been different this year because you have Jalen Brunson, because Randall's played like an all-star this year. And again, Emmanuel quickly. And look, to a different extent, if you want to filter through the lineup data, Mitchell Robinson, which is the other part about this, I think Bam might just kind of cook tomorrow night. And it's because Mitchell Robinson is not there to be an elite rim protector and just kind of, even if it's not a stopper of Bam, a guy that's going to make his life a little more difficult,
Bam has been the can't score on tall people allegations recently. I've been proud of him. He did it. That was a thing. Like legitimately, It was like Bam had struggled against size, against like drop center, like drop bigs, really like big, long drop bigs, like Lopez, Gobert.
That is Mitchell Robinson. Yeah.
Those kinds of guys. But he's solved that. What was the other guy? The Capella is another guy that like would give him problems. These physical big guys, and he's really addressed the allegations that has got to overcome. He's been acquitted. The Mitchell Robinson lineup data is wow. It's funny because with Heat lineup data, a lot of it doesn't make sense, or a lot of it's like, wow, this is like really negligible. The Knicks stuff jumps out of the page.
Yep,
it's insane. It's like you guys have really helpful players and really not helpful players, And it looks like you guys just don't have enough helpful players.
Yeah, that's why it translates to 27 and 25 with a ton of close losses. You know,
well, I'm sure Mitchell would have made your life different.
It's why. Well, Donovan, that's a whole different.
I don't want to open that because that's for both fan bases. Because we got to hear with the whole Tyler and Mitchell thing.
Yeah,
Mitchell.
Yeah. I, as far as this season is concerned, they found something when they finally went to this new rotation, the 9-man rotation in early December. They've been much better. Mitchell Robinson broke his hand 2 Wednesdays ago. And since then, the defense has gone off a cliff. They're just not stopping anybody. The offense is actually kind of
starting. Is it Harnstein?
Jericho Sims has been the starter, I mean, look, he was out of the rotation and then became the starting center. He has his good days and bad days. He's not Mitchell Robinson. He's not the offensive rebounder that Mitchell Robinson was either. So
his impact metrics don't look very good.
They shouldn't. No.
I have one more. I don't want to take more of your time.
Yeah, you're good.
I have one more question. I want to understand. We're having.
Yeah, I dig it. Believe me.
So I'm looking at Randall's stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And Randall's splits aren't like great, right? 34 from 3, 44 from mid-range, 75 free throw percentage, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Rim 65%, plus 3.8 EPM offensive. Mm-hmm. That ranks in the 95th percentile. That makes him one of the best offensive players in the league. What the hell is going on?
There's a few things here. I'm just going to I'm going to add in some Randall stats for you. So please. You brought up EPM, offensive box plus
no,
minus.
EPM estimated plus minus.
Well, so right, I'm going to my.
Okay.
I'm just adding in.
Yeah.
His offensive box plus minus is 4.1, which matches because the way that he's had to make people fear him this year, like you brought up 34% from 3, that has slowly gone up more and more and more as like they've just flat out put better people around him. They've also, the shot chart is what I'd look to. I don't know if you want to I don't know if you pay attention to shot quality or not, but
all the time.
So his shot chart this season, they've eliminated the long 2 that he feasted on in the empty gym season 2 years ago. It's mostly in the paint. He makes a concerted effort to get into the restricted area, or he's taking threes. Like the volume he's taking on threes, it might not be like he's not making a high percentage of them, but it's like, I believe, like you said, 34%, and he's taking close to 8 per game. And if you go by per 36, Randall is taking 8 per 36 is what he is. So like the impact that he's had is that he's been a net positive, especially when you get him going downhill. And because they've taken away some of the more inefficient shots that he's done this year, he's been like a net neutral defensively and such a net positive on offense, which is why the RJ Barrett thing is so fascinating. Because I wonder, and a lot of RJ Barrett truthers believe, if you applied the same thing and same focus to RJ and gave him the same shot profile, could he be better? Could he be the same? Does it matter? I think Randall has been a revelation this season. I don't think it means I don't want to still see what the market is for him this off season. But that's what I would say from the eye test, as well as some of the numbers you've been tracking this year with Julius Randle. They've completely redefined what his shot profile is. And look, if you look at what the Knicks are in drives, that's like their entire offense. They're trying to get to the rim. They're trying to create that lane to get to as many floaters as possible, which leads to offensive rebounds, which is why Mitchell Robinson was feasting earlier this season. But yeah, that's the long way of saying that Randall, it doesn't shock me that his impact metrics are great, as well as the play that you see on the court this year.
It was interesting because, like, you you look at the raw percentages and you're just like, it's not impressive. And then, so if you don't have dunks and threes, highly recommend.
I got it. Pulled it up when you started going to EPM, believe me.
Oh yeah, no, Doug. So I scrolled down to shot density chart and I was like, oh yeah, that track everything that you're saying tracks, and it makes a ton of sense. Which is gonna be fun because Miami allows a ton of threes, doesn't allow a ton at the rim. Kind of encourages you to kind of find your shot in the mid-range, which he's kind of taken that out of his diet. Kind of interesting that goes for both teams. Like what breaks first, right? Like, does he just have a good game from mid-range, or do they find a way to break through and get kind of to the rim? And same goes for Miami because they're both very similar defensively.
I said it at the beginning of this week, just looking at these two teams. This is
a huge game.
Well, it's a huge game because the Knicks don't want to. The Knicks have the Clippers and the Sixers coming in,
and we have the Bucks
week.
On Sunday. On Saturday.
You have a tough schedule coming up too.
Yeah,
and so like the Knicks just need to avoid. When Mitchell Robinson got hurt, there was 14 games leading up to the All-Star break. The Knicks were 25-20, I believe, the night that he got hurt. They fell to 25-20. And I just looked at the schedule and said, if you give me 5-9 over this 14-game stretch, I'll take it. And that includes the Cavs game they won last week and the Celtics game they won last week. So they've already gotten 2 of them. I'm still looking at the schedule, looking for those 3 more wins because they'll be 30-30 at the All-Star break and hopefully can get Mitchell Robinson back. And then we'll see what you have over the final 22 games. This is absolutely a huge game for the Knicks. And you want
both teams.
Well,
they're separated by 2 games. I mean,
yeah.
if the Knicks win, kind of makes that to 1. And if Miami wins, all of a sudden you have a 3-point cushion from the play-in.
Yeah.
And then you're a game back of Cleveland, who you just beat and have the tiebreaker, or you don't have the tiebreaker over them, but you're a game back at Cleveland and Brooklyn, who is kind of was in free fall for a while.
Yeah. We'll see. Well, that's the Brooklyn thing. I was talking to someone who is a fan of the Nets over the weekend, and they're very much like, we saw what we saw with Kevin Durant. Now, like, he's taking his time off. We'll see if they kind of not milk this injury, but kind of take advantage of the fact that you're going to need him for the playoffs, and whether their seeding matters. Will they be okay going in as a 6 seed? Having said that, I agree. This is a big game for both teams. And as we started the show talking about, the rivalry is even more of a reason why this is a big game for both teams. And, I'll be up for it. It sounds like you'll be up for it as well. What are your expectations for tomorrow? Do you think the Heat should beat the Knicks tomorrow night?
I think they should. I think Miami's better. I just think that Miami's top end talent's better. And kind of what I'm looking at is New York's is almost as thin as Miami is. So, I think if
post Mitch, I'd agree with you.
Yeah. I think that they all kind of struggle to find like those next kind of, after maybe 5 or 6 guys, it kind of gets pretty hard to see who you can count on. But I just think I think Jimmy and Bam are really good, and I think they're playing well. And I think that they've always been very successful against drop defenses. And I'm going to be really looking at kind of Tyler in specific, if he can really kind of have a breakthrough again, because he's been not great for a while. And a lot of that has been kind of switchy or very athletic teams. So hopefully, he can kind of get something for Miami's and get something going. But I imagine a very low scoring affair. And I think Bam on Randall's always a ton of fun. Maybe not for you guys because Bam's been incredibly successful at it. But I do think that there's a little bit, with all the All-Star stuff that's going to happen. I think obviously, Randall and Brunson have legit cases, as does Bam. I think Jimmy is probably the best player out of the bunch, but I just think with kind of the games missed, he's a little bit on the outside looking in, although the impact metrics say that he's one of the 10 best players in the league. But, he's only at 1,200 minutes. And Randall's at like 1,800 or something, or almost at 2,000 or whatever. So
very few with more minutes than Julius Randle.
Classic Tibbs. Yeah. Although Nick Nurse is a new Tibbs. I don't know if you know.
Oh, we've heard. It's funny. The people that hate Tibbs in our fan base that then be like, we should get a coach like Nick Nurse. And then I had a couple Raptor fans on and be like, why is Nick Nurse the new Tibbs? He
plays everybody a ton of minutes. And to add to the rivalry aspect of it, Tibbs coached those Bulls teams. Heat fans hated those teams. Those Derrick Rose Bulls teams, that was
even though prime. they never beat them. Like, wait a minute,
the Bulls never beat Miami. Right,
that's what I'm saying. Even though, why would you hate somebody that never beat you?
Because the nation was in love with Derrick Rose and that Bulls team.
Okay, took an MVP from LeBron. Okay, I see.
And they were like crowned away, and they were beloved in a way that I think Miami and like the team and the players were like. And the Bulls broke their 27-game win streak. Kirk Heinrich ripped the ball out of Chris Bosh's hand. So there's a little something there. And LeBron has his history with the Bulls. So,
well, from my perspective, the Pat Riley thing will also be the thing that fuels any Knicks.
I wonder if he's going to the game. He usually goes. Wonder if he'll be there. Wonder if he'll be there.
We'll see. Welcome back to the city, Pat Riley. This has been fun, man. We went a lot longer than I expected to.
We did.
This is a really good conversation. Thank you
to talk about
for making the time. I never thought I'd break bread with a Miami Heat fan and actually like enjoy it. You know,
I've had to break bread with too many Knicks fans. So,
well, that's where you're used to us knuckleheads that have migrated down to the South. Giancarlo,
it's all love.
Tell everybody where they could find all the stuff that you do and all the work that goes on at the Miami Heat beat.
You can check me out at GNavas103 on Twitter. You can find me apologizing for Kyle Lowry and also just tweeting Heat stuff. You know, have a good time with us. Host MHB Pod, Miami Heat Beat podcast. Catch us on Twitch most nights, twitch.tv/Miami Heat Beat. We do a post-game show and a pre-game show. We got pre-game in with Frankie and Kenny, and post-game with usually myself. Tomorrow is our big post-game show. It's Hangover Time. That is our once-a-week special Inside the NBA version of Heat Beat. Alphonse Sidney hosts, and we have a really great time. We also poke a lot of fun at RJ Barrett, Andrew.
Oh, man.
So we're going to have something for him tomorrow. But check out Hangover Time. It's a really fun. I encourage Knicks fans to come. I think the biggest compliment we get from people is other fans from other teams are like, man, this was fun. I really like this. Because even if the Heat lose, we're making fun of the Heat. And we're like, so we just have a good time. So if you're a Knicks fan, come join us live if you're not here, or catch it on YouTube at the Miami Heat Beat YouTube page. So hopefully you guys can have some fun with us. And Andrew, thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time.
Absolutely. Thanks again, man.
No problem.